Hello, I'm Dave and this is Logan, out once again for a walk in the countryside. Thanks for joining us. Now today we're at the pretty village of Abbotts Ann in North Hampshire. It's located about a couple of miles southwest of Andover, and we're going to be walking a roughly 6.5 mile figure of 8 route. We'll start off with a look around the village, passing by the Pillhill Brook. We'll head east to explore an Iron Age hill fort at Berry Hill, and then retrace our steps before heading out on a sort of countryside loop to the west before returning to the village. Now I'm filming at the beginning of April and well, the weather is really weird at the moment. I mean, there is a little bit of sun out at the moment, but there's a lot of cloud. It's going to be quite a dull day today. In fact, there's a storm brewing. The forecast suggesting that there'll be gales just after lunchtime. So we need to kick on. I think it's going to be one of those walks where the light conditions aren't going to be that great. It's actually quite warm, about 14-15 degrees, but with the wind, so Logan's going to keep his fleece on at the moment, but it should be perfect for walking. Do come along with us. Well, Arthur Mee, in his King's England Hampshire book that was published in 1939, described Abbotts Ann as one of nature's exquisite little places. Well, let's check out to see if that's true. Well, we'll start at the sort of southern end of the village and wander through. The name Abbotts Ann, well, Ann comes from the Celtic river name, well, Ann or Ash Tree Stream. There's a river to the north now called the Pillhill Brook, and we'll see that shortly. The Abbot bit was due to the monastic connection with Hyde Abbey at Winchester, and it's certainly full of beautiful thatched cottages such as this one in front of me here. There have been people living around here for centuries. It's very close to a fording point over the river, and there's an Iron Age hill fort to the east, a Roman villa to the south, but it shows all the hallmarks of a typical Saxon settlement by a river, and downland close by, and of course water meadows as well. Well, that's an interesting house. I think it's called Black Swan House with the black swan on the wall. I wonder if it was a pub in days gone by. I don't know. And this lovely building here, I think is the old schoolhouse. As you can see, timber frame with brick infill, and there's a lovely sort of herringbone pattern of the bricks on the right hand side there. And there's the pub, the Eagle Inn, built, as you can see, red brick. It's an 18th century building with some old stables to the right there. And I believe it won a camera award for selection of real ales from local breweries. And I've actually come across a lovely old photograph of it as well. And it's got a skittle alley. I expect it'll be our final destination. Again, another delightful cottage. What's it called? Lane Cottage. And next door, you've got the Abbotts Ann village shop and post office. I think it's a community shop and post office that was opened in 2002. Oh, I love this little bit of the village here with the tree and a little island. Indeed, I'm pretty sure I came across an old photograph of this exact spot as well. So peaceful here. Oh, I love this one, the old bakery. And this is down Dunkirk Lane, and we'll be heading out down that lane later on in the walk when we start our sort of out in the countryside bit. Well, this little path takes us to our next destination, the church. Gosh, aren't those beautiful there? Sadly, I fear they may be blown away in a few hours' time. And this is the Church of St Mary. By the 14th century, a more substantial church existed. However, in 1716 that was demolished and this new one was built from money that came from the sale a year later of a huge Indian diamond which had made the fortune for a chap called Thomas Pitt, who was governor of Madras. And on his return to England in 1710, he bought the Abbotts Ann estate and, as I say, demolished the old church and replaced it. He had bought the diamond, which had originally been found in 1698, in 1701 for £20,000 and sold it to a French agent in 1717 for £135,000. Not a bad return. And it eventually became one of the crown jewels of France and known as Le Regent or Le Regent. And it's been on display at the Louvre Museum in Paris since 1887, and I believe it's now worth well over £50 million. Well, as for the church today, you can see there's an aisleless nave of 4 bays, a chancel, a west tower which incorporates an entrance and a small vestry. Right, in we go. Now this, folks, is a quite extraordinary church. There's so much to see. Firstly, what the little font down there, and it is quite little. That's one of the smallest fonts that I have ever seen. And either side of the nave, there are some quite magnificent stained glass windows. Aren't they beautiful? And there's the magnificent pulpit, and then just heading towards the chancel. Again, a lovely stained glass window above the altar there. And then that's the organ. But there is much more to see. Firstly, well, let me talk about the kneelers. And the chancel here, just down the side, hopefully you can see, it is quite dark. All these kneelers here have got the names of rectors in the past. And then just along here, this slightly larger kneeler where it says knit together in love. That's for, well, whenever there's a bride and groom here. But the real gem of this church is, if you look up onto the ceiling, you'll see this display of what looks like crowns. And these are the Virgin crowns. And basically they're crown-shaped garlands that were used as a funeral memento for virgins. The garlands were carried on the coffin during the funeral procession and then displayed later in the church. And it was usually a young maid that had died before she could be a bride, although sometimes it could also be a young man. And St Mary's here has the largest collection of these Virgin's crowns in the UK. I think they're down to 41 now. And the dates vary from 1740 to the most recent one in 1973. And I've just been speaking to a lovely chap, Gordon, who's one of the wardens here, and he was telling me all about their history. Well, I tell you, I've never seen anything like this before, so forgive me if I go into a little bit more detail about the background of these crowns. The custom of the crowns has its origins in medieval England, when the Blessed Virgin Mary was also titled Queen of Heaven. And basically, when a person died in a parish whose church was dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and if they had led good lives and were unmarried and therefore deemed to be virgins, then a crown was made for them as a recollection of the honour and protection of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The crowns were made from hazelwood, which is also known as virgin wood or oak, and they took the form of a bishop's mitre and were decorated with white and black paper rosettes. They would then hang from the rim of the crown with 5 gauntlets, And on each gauntlet, family members would write the name, ages and date of death of the person and include carefully chosen passages of biblical text or hymns. The gauntlets themselves were not attached to the crown until later in the ceremony. And during the funeral procession, the crown would be carried suspended on a white wand by two girls aged between 12 and 16, dressed in white with folded cloth placed on their heads. They would lead the funeral procession, turn and place the crown on the coffin, where it would accompany the coffin to the graveyard. It was then removed and hung in the gallery so that all who entered the church afterwards had to pass under it and be reminded of the deceased. It was then removed and hung in the nave on a hook bearing a shield on which the person's name was written, and then left in the church until it fell to pieces. We might think that the crown is an understandable custom, but why the gauntlets? Well, it's thought they harked back to the days when knights wore gauntlets as part of their armour and would toss them to the ground to issue a challenge to any adversary who challenged their reputation, throwing down the gauntlet. And the gauntlet appeared in the mid-15th century. And at the funeral, the gauntlets will be held up as a challenge to anyone to call into question the character of the deceased. And if no one did so, the gauntlets will be raised to hang around the crown. I'd say a quite extraordinary story. And indeed, quite a few of the kneelers here also have the names of some of the virgins that had their crowns up on the wall. I'll continue to make my way through the village, sort of heading eastwards, I suppose, but I'm going to do a little detour down to check out the river. And I think Logan can take his fleece off now. And this is the Pillhill Brook. And it's 6 miles long. It's a tributary of the River Anton. And it's your typical Hampshire chalk stream. I can easily see the gravel bottom, crystal clear water. It rises near Fifield to the west and, as I say, joins the River Anton to the east at Upper Clatford. Morning. A lovely day to be out riding.
Not raining.
Well, get out before the storm arrives. Now, this is an interesting house called Penny Marsh. As you can see, it's thatched and sort of stands on the corner of a road, but it's possibly the oldest building in the village. The middle part of the house was a medieval cruck-framed hall, probably from the 15th century. And in the late 16th, early 17th century, a first floor was added. Wow, isn't that quite gorgeous? I think it's called Ash Barn. Beautiful. Oh, these chocolate box cottages just keep on coming, don't they? This one's called Pollyanna Cottage. So well maintained. Another glimpse of the Pillhill Brook in full flow. We've certainly had a lot of rain recently, and just look beyond the water meadows, pretty full at the moment as well. Well, we're coming to the edge of the village, and this is the Poplar farm at Abbotts Ann. Originally there were 2 farm labourers' cottages, and the family bought them and converted them into one house. And in the 1970s they decided to convert it into a pub and extend it by buying a barn next to it and converting it to a bar. It suffered a major fire in 2005, but it has been restored. Oh, I love the village sign there with one of the Virgin's crowns on it. Brilliant. Well, this is where we temporarily leave the village, cross the A343 to check out an Iron Age hill fort over to the east. And the wind's beginning to pick up now. and this is the Berry Hill Iron Age hill fort, and it covers something like 22 acres. There were two stages of construction. The first fort, which was built between the 5th century to 3rd century BC, covered just 9.8 hectares and had just the one rampart and ditch. The second fort, that was built between, 2nd century to 1st century BC, covered just 4.75 hectares, but it had a couple of ramparts and ditches. The actual centre here isn't accessible to the public, but you can walk round it. And there's a nature reserve now on land to the south of it. Well, I just made it to the top of the hill fort, so let's check out the view. So this is looking back over to Abbotts Ann and the busy main road, and then just panning around. I appreciate it's a pretty dull day. And then over to the right here, that's the outskirts of Andover. Well, we had a little wander around the fort, so we're now going to head back towards the village and then start heading southwards for our next little bit into the countryside. Hello, you two. You look very cosy in your little rugs there. Oh, get out of the way. No, you get out of the way. Oh, you really are cuties. Well, I made my way back to Abbotts Ann, and now we're going to start heading southwards. So I'm going to go down a little lane called Dunkert Lane. In the old days it used to be called Dung Cart Lane. It's such a shame that the sun isn't out today, because some of these houses and cottages would look even better in glorious sunshine. But even so, that's Rose Cottage behind me. Well, just a little update on the route. Looks like we've got quite a hard surface along this track, which is great. It means we won't come across any mud. And that's great wood, I think, in the far distance on the right. Well, I'm continuing to make my way along this track. The wind's beginning to blow now. Hopefully you can hear me above the audio. Where I am now, if you look on an 1896 map, there was once a small building, and there was a pond as well. But these days, nothing, just a bunch of trees. Although I can just about make out the pond. It's in there somewhere. Well, just a little update on the route. This is the track that we've been coming up. We've sort of been heading southwest, I suppose. And this is Dunkert Barn. At this point, we now head directly south. And that little bit of wood on our left is called the Groves. Right, now somewhere behind me in that field there was once a Roman villa, and the site of it does show on an old map. It was built around about 300 AD, and the remains were only discovered in 1854, and a mosaic pavement was found, and one bit of the mosaic, about 6 foot square, is now on display in the British Museum. The villa and outbuildings covered about 7 acres. Of course, we're not far from the old Roman road, the Portway, which ran from Salisbury to Silchester over to the west. Little update on the route. We've been following a footpath basically along the sides of fields, not too muddy, but where we are now is probably about as far south as we're going to go, and we now change direction, heading northwards on the homeward leg back towards the village. Well, I do believe that the sun is about to make a very brief appearance. I have a feeling that this is the lull before the storm. Wow! Now, I think this is my first sighting of bluebells this spring. What a beautiful sight. We've got the blues and the yellows and the greens. Oh, it's quite idyllic. Another sign of spring. Oilseed rape. And that familiar yellow top to it, of course. Just coming along a little shaded path, and very shortly we should pick up an old drover's route, if I've got my bearings right. Ah yes, here we go. This is the track that I was looking for. It's actually called the Drove, and indeed it's an ancient drover's route, and livestock would have come along here on the way to Weyhill Fair, which was on the western side of Andover. It was one of the biggest fairs and sheep markets in the country, with origins back to the medieval times. Long gone now, of course. The last sheep sale held there, I think, was 1957. Not 100% sure. Well, folks, we've made it back to Abbotts Ann and the Eagle, which of course we've had to visit purely for research purposes for the video, and to check out their ale. This is a pint of Wallop. Oh, very nice too. And of course, as is traditional, some crisps. They're not pipers, but they're real hand-cooked sea salt. Well, I hope you enjoyed the walk today. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up and a like, and do leave a comment, and do check out our Facebook page, Dave's Countryside Walks. We just about made it. I know the sun's out now, but the forecast, well, literally about 3 hours time, there's going to be about 40-mile-an-hour winds around these parts. Anyway, so until we meet again, thanks for watching, and cheerio. Good boy. Another crisps? Yeah. I say, this is rather nice.